Okay, so now we're actually going to put some content in here. We've obviously given our heading. So let us select a medium string, and I'm going to call this field name for the user's name, what they need to fill in. We have underneath that a symbolic name, and as you may have noticed there, after I selected the name and moved away from the field, the symbolic name was automatically generated, copying exactly what the name is there. Now this is something that 9 times out of 10 you will not have to change. The symbolic name is how this is stored within the database. It's how the system recognizes the name of this field exactly, and it will generate based off whatever you type in the name. And that's fine. There will be only one real reason to maybe potentially change this, and another reason depending on your preferences. So the main reason is that if you are planning on creating a field with the exact same name more than once, then the symbolic name cannot be the same. As I said, that is how it's referenced or identified within the database. If it had the same symbolic name, it just couldn't identify or separate between the two. So that is something that we would have to consider. As we'll see later on in the form, I am going to showcase that. Another example of where you maybe want to change the symbolic name is depending on the length of the field's actual name. And that's because the symbolic name is limited to about 30 characters, meaning of course that after a certain period of time, when maybe you've put quite a long question as the name of the field, the symbolic name just can't keep up with it, and of course it will lose that sort of information. And you can just leave the symbolic name being quite sparse, that's fine, cutting mid-sentence or something like that. It doesn't really matter too much, but if you wanted to tidy that up, that is again something you can change the symbolic name for. But in this circumstance, this is absolutely fine. Keep it as it is. And we can also apply an optional hint. And what an optional hint will allow us to do is, if I very quickly hit save, is it will apply a question mark next to the field, which I can mouse over, presenting a tooltip, allowing us to give a bit more context to maybe what this field is about. For this circumstance, it's certainly something that we don't really need, so I'm going to remove that. There we go. So underneath the optional hint, we then have our type. The type is going to allow us to adjust the field selection that we have made. So for instance, maybe we didn't necessarily mean a medium string, we meant a medium text area. As we can see, this is going to open up and allow us to select from all of the options that we saw up at the top of the form and select the appropriate one at this time, allowing you to correct maybe a mistake that you've made. You've selected the wrong item. You can, as I said, a prime example of that might be when you've selected medium string instead of medium text. You can obviously adjust that. You don't have to delete the field and come back and try again, but we'll keep it as the medium string type now. We also have our string format, and this will allow for the changing and functionality of this type of field. This is only available for text strings, as we will see when we're creating this form, that different functionality will appear based on the type of field that we've selected. And we can see, of course, for the strings, we have this string format. The options that we have available are either a text, an integer, a floating point, or an email. Now, the default will be text, and this is considered alphanumeric, so you will very, very rarely have to deviate away from this field. This is only if you need to be very specific would you change the text format. However, if you need to be quite specific, you have these additional options. So we have an integer allowing for a specific number. If we were to type anything other than that number in there, or a number, should I say, then the form can't be submitted. It'll have to be registered as a specific number in order to have this field be registered correctly. Likewise with the floating point, it would have to be a numeric with a decimal point in there. Otherwise, again, the form cannot be submitted. And finally, of course, with an email format, it has to be of an email sort of address, such and such at something.com. If it's not registered in that sort of format, it will not again allow you to submit the form there. So in this circumstance, we simply just want to leave it as text. This is alphanumeric, so if I did put a number in there, if I put an email address or anything like that, it would be completely fine. Underneath that, we have our default value. And what this will allow us to do is, of course, preemptively type something within this field will automatically appear when a user comes to submit their own version of this form. So I can type in something like, enter your name here. And this means, of course, that when a person tries to submit a new form or a new ticket within this form, it will automatically populate the field with enter your name here. And that is something you can use, but something also, again, to be aware of is that if we do something like this, and also, as we can see underneath, make the form or the particular field required, mandatory to fill out, it will register the default text to be so that the field is populated, and you will be able to move on and submit the form in that regard. So bear that in mind. What we would actually prefer to do in this circumstance, to be honest, is maybe leave that empty. But we also have the ability, as we can see with our use existing variables section, to copy information directly from a person's profile. So if I look at this drop down that is being used in existing variables, we can see, of course, that this is going to pull through the information from a person's profile and automatically apply it to this field. So I could say, for instance, user first name and user surname. And what this means is when an user comes to submit a form or a ticket within this form, what will happen is the system will check their profile. It will look for the first name and the surname fields, and whatever has been applied in there will automatically be pulled through, representing their name, giving a bit of an automated but personal touch. It's not necessarily something you have to do, but it's always a nice little additional feature, and this is available for any sort of text fields. So this is for obviously these the medium or the short, medium, long text strings, as well as the short, medium, long text areas. I could make this required, but of course with it already having the person's name in, that might not be something we'd like to do. So as an alternative, we could disable the field, meaning that this field cannot be edited. Once the content has been applied in there, as we can see, it's automatically going to be done. No changes can be made to that field. It's going to be sort of stored in there automatically. So people can't revert this from another person's name. They couldn't submit it on another person's behalf. It really depends on the type of form that you're creating where this might come in play. So I am actually going to leave it disabled because, of course, we've already got a person's name being pulled through. There's no need to make changes to this field at all. And the last option in these sort of radio buttons here is to reload the form on changing. Now this is something we will be utilizing further down the line, and what it really means is that the form, based on any sort of adjustments or tweaks you make to this specific field, will make the form have a sort of refresh and reload the information on there. And this is something that can be utilized for creating advanced rules within an InfoCapture project. I'm going to apply a couple of these as the form goes on, but for this particular field it's not necessary, so we're going to leave that unticked. Now I can just hit save now, and I have created that field. Everything is fine there. But before I do, I just quickly want to show you the style information as well as the constraints, which are the two tabs up at the top.